Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew. In this class, we're going to be looking at how to add waist darts to a dress pattern. Now, you can use this technique whether you're wanting to add them to a bodice block or whether you're wanting to add them to an existing pattern, such as my Copen pattern, which is a basic shift dress pattern. So you might want to add waist darts to a garment if you want to improve or increase the fit around the waist area. Obviously, adding a waist dart means that you can fit through the waist up to the bust and down to the hips of a garment. In this class, we're going to be looking at the size of the waist darts that you should add based on your individual figure, as well as the correct placement. Let's start by talking about the size of the darts that you want to add. So the size of the waist dart is going to be based on the difference between your waist and your low hip. The greater the difference between your waist and your low hip, the larger the dart size you require. You can use these measurements as a starting point for the size of the dart. So what happens if you get your dart size wrong? If you have darts that are too large, they can end up looking a little bit pointy and not very flattering on the body. If your darts are too small, then you may not achieve the fit that you want at the waist, but you might be thinking that you could simply take the garment in at the side seam. Now, this is something else we need to consider. In woven fitted garments, the shape of the side seam does matter. If you want to fit the garment at the waist and have a very shaped side seam, you can have issues with the seam not sewing very well and drag lines on the finished garment. In a woven fabric, if you want the garment to be very fitted at the waist, you will need to apply darts or a seam such as princess seams. As a very general rule, approximately 60% of the difference between your waist and your low hip can be absorbed on the side seam of a garment. The 40% difference should be absorbed as darts. That 40% would be distributed around all of the darts, so 4 darts, the 60% around the 2 side seams. This is really a consideration for woven stable fabrics. If you're working with a stretchy fabric such as a knit or a jersey, then you can get away with very shaped side seams and no darts. Generally speaking, you can have your dart on the back of the garment slightly larger than the front of the garment. However, this does depend on your individual figure and the garment that you are working with. Let's look at adding some darts to this dress pattern, starting with the front. We're going to want to align the placement of the front dart with the bust apex because we want the dart from the waist up to the bust to be pointing towards the fullness of the bust. Draw a line parallel with the centre front down from the bust apex towards the low hip. The largest part of the dart is going to be sitting at the waist. Decide on the size of the dart that you want to use on your front pattern. Distribute this either side of the centre line on the waist. For the top of my waist dart in the front, I will want to back it away from the bust apex so that the dart doesn't have to travel over the shape of the bust. I usually back this away by 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch. Connect the waist dart from the waist up towards the bust. For the bottom of the waist dart, you're going to want this to be pointing towards the fullest part of your abdomen shape. Usually this is around the high hip area, approximately halfway between the waist and the low hip. Connect from the base of your dart to the waist point. Most of the time I will draw these in straight lines, but you can use your French curve to soften the edges if you want to. Now for the back of the garment, the waist dart is usually positioned in approximately the centre of the waist. Distribute the dart volume either side of the central point. Draw a line through the centre of the back waist dart parallel to the centre back. For the top of the back waist dart, I usually position this on the bust guideline, in line with the front bust apex. Connect the back dart from the waist to the top of the dart. For the base of the back dart, you want the dart to point to the fullness of your figure. This will usually be longer at the back than it is in the front. As a starting point, you could use the measurement between your waist and your low hip and remove 1/3. Connect the bottom of the dart up to the waist guidelines. You can also choose to put your waist darts on a slight angle if you prefer. Again, most of the time I would have the waist dart in the centre of my back pattern, but I might connect the waist darts closest to the centre back with the dart leg at the shoulder, aligning the waist darts and the shoulder dart on a similar line. The top of the waist dart will be in the same position, aligned with the bust. The bottom of the waist dart can be a parallel line to the centre back from the centre of the waist dart at the waist, finishing at the same point. When we look at the Copen pattern, the same rules apply. You will need to begin by choosing which of the bust apex points and the size that you're going to make is right for your figure. If you want to move the bust apex point, then I would recommend that you do that first. Find the bust apex point that works for you and draw a line parallel to the centre front down to the low hip. At the waistline, you will position your dart. My dart in the front is going to be 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch, and I will position this either side of the central line. I will position my dart 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch down from my bust apex and connect to the waist points for the dart. For the base of the dart, I'm going to measure between the waist and the low hip, find the halfway point, and use this to connect the dart. Of course, I would advise that you make a sample and see what works best for your individual figure. Moving on to the back of the dart, I would advise that you draw on your waistline to the size of the pattern that you're planning to make. Remove the seam allowances at both sides of the pattern, the side seam and the centre back. Measure the waistline of the pattern and find the central point. Draw a central line for the dart that is parallel to the centre back and the grain line, and a right angle to the lengthen and shorten lines. For the base of the dart in the back, you could measure between the waist and the low hip. Divide that measurement by 3 and measure up from the base of the low hip by this figure. Distribute the dart widths that you want to use either side of the central line. I'm using a dart size of 2.5 centimetres, 1 inch in the back of this pattern. Connect the waist markings of the dart to the bottom of the dart. I usually align at the top of the back dart with the bust, but on fitting this pattern, I was able to take it a little bit higher. This can depend on your figure and the ease of the pattern. I found the stitching line at the underarm and positioned my dart 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch below this point. Connect for the top of the waist dart in the back. The good thing about waist darts is if they're not quite right, you can easily extend them or shorten them on your finished garment. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the class and I hope to see you again soon.